what we're going to talk about today is how to make sure students are practicing in a way that helps their performance in a particular skill improve. Hi, I'm Nina Parrish, author of The Independent Learner, a guide for teachers who are trying to help their students improve their self-regulation skills, including their ability to focus, persevere, and use metacognitive skills while they're learning. Today we're going to talk about practice. So a lot of times we have the idea as teachers that if students just do enough practice, there's a certain magical number of practice that will result in their performance improving. And that's not necessarily true. There's no magic practice number that will result in better performance. In fact, a lot of times I know a problem that I've had in the classroom is that, especially with our struggling students, they practice, but that practice actually doesn't result in better performance. So what we're going to talk about today is how to make sure students are practicing in a way that helps their performance in a particular skill improve. And the key to improve performance with practice is something that's called deliberate practice. So what we're going to talk about is how we can make sure that when our students are practicing, they're doing deliberate practice. So you might be wondering, what's the difference between deliberate practice and just plain old regular practice? Deliberate practice has 3 components. But before we talk about those, the most important thing to work on with students if they're going to engage in deliberate practice is that their practice has to be goal-oriented. In other words, students need to know why they're practicing. Because a lot of times when students don't know why they're practicing, they're really not that engaged in the practice because they don't see the point. They also don't know what the end goal is. So it's really important that before students start practicing, they have a goal for that practice. And in the best case scenario, that goal would be based on that student's performance. So for example, before you started a skill, you might do a little informal pre-test. Maybe some questions with clickers or something like that to see what students know before you begin the unit. And based on that pretest, students could create goals for where they wanted to be by the end of the unit. A lot of times it also helps to understand what the grade level standard is and what the expectation is of that student for this particular skill. And so the teacher could help the student understand what they're supposed to be able to do for their particular grade level with that skill by the end of this unit. So after students have a goal and they know where they're going, the first component that makes practice deliberate is that when they start practicing, they are thinking about their thinking. They're self-monitoring and they're self-evaluating their own practice. And that means that while they're practicing, they might be asking themselves some questions. Maybe they're asking, what is going well with this practice? Or what is not going so well with this practice? What am I not really understanding? What's unclear? Or once they're done with the practice, they might be thinking about, well, if there were things that didn't go that well, what do I need to do differently next time? After the student practices, the second component of deliberate practice, and in my opinion, the very most important component, is that the student would get immediate feedback from the teacher. And I think that in the classroom, a lot of times teachers think that they're giving feedback, and the student actually doesn't feel like they're receiving feedback. And I think that the reason that there's that disconnect is because in order for feedback to be effective and useful, it has to contain a few important components. So when the teacher is giving feedback to the student, the feedback needs to remind the student of their goal and tell them where they were going. The second thing that the feedback should contain is it should tell the student specifically how they did on the task. So it should tell them what progress they've made towards their goal, and then what they should do next. So the feedback should remind them of the goal, tell them based on this practice what progress they've made towards that goal, and then what they need to do next in order to improve their performance. So feedback should always have those 3 questions or elements in order to be effective. And then the third component that makes practice deliberate is that the student is going to take their own self-evaluation and self-monitoring and the feedback that they got from their teacher, and they're going to use that to refine their skills. And so what that would look like is they would think about the way that they approach the task at first. And they would monitor their current level of understanding and think about if there were things that maybe they weren't understanding very well so that they could ask questions. They would look for mistakes in their work. And then once they found mistakes, they would correct those mistakes or look at their process and correct the mistakes in their process to see if maybe there was something missing or confusing that was causing them to not get the correct answer that they could correct in order to be able to do that skill better or more efficiently or more correctly. And then they're going to go back and update the way that they're doing that particular skill so that next time they can make improvements in their performance. And then the last thing is that if students are refining their skills and if they're using deliberate practice, you'll know because they will have insights. So they should be able to, once they found the mistakes that they were making, they should be able to explain what those mistakes were, how they would correct them, and then what they're going to do differently next time as a result. And so in that way, as students practice deliberately, they get better and better at a particular skill because they're thinking about what didn't go so well, and for the next time, they're refining the way that they're doing that skill. And so as a student gets better, the teacher increases the level of difficulty of the task that that student is doing to make sure that they continuously have a challenge in the work that they're being asked to do. So that is a little short recap of what it means to make practice deliberate in the classroom. I hope that you found this video beneficial and helpful for working with students. If you want some more information, I'm going to link an article that I wrote on deliberate practice in the comments. And of course, you could check out my book, The Independent Learner, for activities and a more detailed description of deliberate practice. Thank you so much for tuning in.